In our family, there was a single, unspoken law. I needed my twin sister Chloe's permission before I could ever seek medical treatment. My lungs felt like they were being squeezed in a vice as I watched Chloe rehearse the speech she would give at her birthday party. I instinctively reached for my inhaler resting on the coffee table, but my mother intercepted it, snatching it away before my fingers could touch the cool plastic. "Chloe, does Maya need this?" My mom asked, her voice tinged with deference to my sister. Chloe didn't even bother to look up from the bright screen of her phone. "She used it at lunch. She's fine," she declared flatly. "You heard your sister," Mom said, her tone final as she tucked my lifeline into the depths of her purse. "No attention-seeking behavior today. It is Chloe's sweet 16th, after all." This bizarre rule had been rigidly enforced since we were 12, stemming from the day I supposedly faked having pneumonia during Chloe's big ballet recital. The truth was I hadn't faked it, but Chloe insisted I had, and in our family, her word became gospel. From that moment forward, every single headache, every fever, and every terrifying asthma attack had to be vetted and validated by the golden twin. "I can't breathe." The wheezing started, a faint, high-pitched whistle my doctor once described as my body's own desperate alarm bell. "Maya." My dad's voice boomed from the doorway, sharp and accusatory. "What is our rule if you feel you're getting sick?" I knew the script by heart. Ask Chloe first. And what was Chloe's verdict? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Chloe finally tore her eyes from her phone, her expression a mask of pure annoyance. I said, "She's fine." "Gosh, Maya, do you always have to make my special day all about you?" The pressure on my chest intensified, as if a grown man were sitting squarely on my ribs. Each attempt to draw a breath was like trying to suck air through a tiny coffee stirrer. "Please," I gasped out, the words tearing from my throat. "I need the hospital." "Chloe, honey," Mom whimpered, rushing to my twin's side to comfort her. "She's doing it again. Make her stop." "Don't you worry, sweetie," Mom cooed. "Maya, if you're going to act like this, you need to go to your room. The modeling scout will be here any minute." I tried to push myself to my feet, but my body refused to cooperate, and I had to clutch the arm of the couch for support. A terrifying change was happening. My fingernails were slowly turning a dusky shade of blue. "Look," I said, raising my hands as proof. Chloe just laughed, a cruel, dismissive sound. She probably painted them blue for effect. Remember how she faked passing out at my dance recital? It hadn't been a prank. I had suffered a severe asthma attack, but Chloe had spun a tale of jealousy to our parents, so they refused to leave her performance to help me. The doorbell chimed, signaling the arrival of the first party guests. "Maya, you need to disappear," Dad ordered, his voice low and urgent. "Chloe's modeling scout is on their way. We can't have you wheezing in the background and ruining the atmosphere." My breathing was becoming labored, my lungs working in overdrive, a frantic, visible struggle beneath my shirt. Every breath was a battle, and I was losing. "Mom, please," I begged. "I really need to go to the hospital." "Chloe," my mother said, her voice dripping with affection for my twin. "Your sister has requested to go to the hospital. What do you think, sweetheart?" Chloe moved to stand directly in front of me, completely blocking our parents' view of my deteriorating state. For a fleeting instant, I saw a flicker of something dark and calculating in her eyes. "She's faking," Chloe announced loudly. "She's just upset because Liam is coming." Liam was my childhood best friend, a friend Chloe had deliberately stolen from me simply because she could. I knew it. Mom exclaimed triumphantly. "Maya, you stop this nonsense this instant." It was at that moment that I began to cough, and a spray of blood speckled my lips. Chloe's best friend, Sophie, who had just walked in, froze in her tracks. "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with Maya?" Chloe quickly moved to intercept her. "She's just being dramatic. Chloe, she's coughing up blood." "No, she's not," Chloe insisted, once again positioning herself to hide me from view. "Everything is perfectly fine. Go help with the decorations." But Sophie was pre-med and knew a crisis when she saw one. She pushed past Chloe and grabbed my wrist, her fingers finding my pulse. "Her pulse is through the roof. This is a medical emergency." "We don't have medical emergencies without Chloe's permission," Dad stated, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "It's a house rule." "What?" Sophie looked at him in horror. "Chloe knows Maya best," Mom explained patiently as if to a child. "She can always tell when Maya is actually sick versus when she's just putting on a performance." A performance? Sophie was already dialing 911 on her phone. "She's going into respiratory failure." "Give me that phone," Dad demanded, lunging for it. "Mr. Henderson, with all due respect, your daughter is dying." "Chloe," Mom said, her voice now laced with anxiety as she turned to my twin. "Is Maya dying?" Chloe hesitated, her face contorting as the spotlight on her birthday finally shifted away from her. Once again, it was because of me. "No," Chloe said, her voice firm and resolute. "She's not dying. She pulls this stunt every single time something important is about to happen for me, and that was when I stopped breathing entirely." The silence in the room was absolute and immediate. "Maya," Chloe's voice sounded distant, tinged with a faint note of uncertainty. "Stop it. People are here." "Chloe, she is not breathing," Sophie yelled, her voice cracking with panic. "She's just holding her breath," Chloe shot back, but her own voice wavered. "She is so committed to ruining my party." I slumped forward off the couch, my body hitting the floor with a dull thud. The impact should have been painful, but I couldn't feel anything at all. "Somebody call 911. Sophie was now on her knees, beginning chest compressions. But Chloe said, Mom started to say. I don't care what Chloe said. More guests were arriving, and the background filled with screams and chaos. I could faintly hear someone frantically yelling about finding my inhaler. "This is all Maya's fault," Chloe sobbed hysterically. "She always does this. Always." "Your sister is dying," Sophie grunted between compressions. "Help me get her off of her," Dad pleaded, trying to pull Sophie away from me. Chloe said she's fine. Liam's voice cut through the encroaching darkness. "Mr. Henderson, what are you doing?" "She's blue. She's actually blue." Chloe's shriek was the last thing I heard before everything went black. "You were supposed to be on my side." 3 days later, I awoke in the sterile, beeping world of the intensive care unit. The doctor explained that I had been clinically dead for 4 agonizing minutes. My parents had stood by for 4 minutes, waiting for Chloe's approval to save my life. They couldn't meet my eyes. They just kept repeating the same mantra. "Chloe said you were fine," over and over again. But Sophie knew the truth. Liam knew. Everyone at that party knew. And we were about to bring their world crashing down. When my eyes fluttered open again, the monitors surrounding my bed kept their steady, rhythmic beeping. The doctor, a man named Dr. Carter, stood beside me with a clipboard and a grave expression. He pulled a chair close and began to explain how my respiratory failure had been so catastrophic that my heart had stopped for 4 full minutes. He told me that those 4 minutes without oxygen to my brain meant they had to monitor me closely for any signs of long-term damage. His pen scratched across the paper as he noted my responses to his questions, asking if I could feel my fingers and toes, if I knew my own birthday, and if I could count backward from 10. Then, Dr. Carter shared something that made my chest constrict with a new kind of fear. The hospital had already reported my case to Child Protective Services. He explained that numerous witnesses from the party had given statements about my parents actively preventing anyone from calling for help while I was dying. A social worker from CPS would come to speak with me once I was more stable, but the hospital was legally obligated to report what had happened as a case of severe medical neglect. My parents showed up an hour later. Mom immediately launched into a performance of dramatic crocodile tears, wailing about how terrified she had been. Dad just kept insisting that they genuinely believed I was being dramatic, as I supposedly always was during Chloe's big moments. They wanted to take me home immediately, but Dr. Carter intervened, stating firmly that I required at least another week of observation due to the severity of the cardiac arrest and the potential for complications. After the doctor left, I pressed the nurse call button. When she entered, I told her everything. I told her about the rule that had been in place since I was 12, the rule requiring Chloe's approval for any medical care, even something as simple as using my inhaler. The nurse's eyes grew wide. She grabbed a notepad and furiously began writing down every word I said, occasionally asking me to repeat certain details, all the while shaking her head and muttering that this information had to be added to my official medical chart immediately. The next day, Sophie and Liam arrived together. They sat on either side of my bed and swore they would give official statements about everything they witnessed. Sophie had a notepad where she had meticulously documented my vital signs before the paramedics arrived, using her pre-med training. Liam showed me his phone, where he had recorded a video of the chaos, a clip that clearly showed my father physically restraining Sophie from calling 911. 2 days after that, a woman from CPS named Jessica Miller came to interview me. She was gentle but thorough, asking detailed questions about the medical permission rule and how long it had been enforced. She carefully photographed the old, faded scars on my arms from untreated allergic reactions that had become infected years ago. She documented every single incident I could remember where Chloe had denied me medical care for things like strep throat, a broken finger, and a severe case of food poisoning. The following morning, Dr. Ben Carter, a lung specialist, came to assess my asthma. He spent over an hour with me, patiently teaching me how to create a comprehensive action plan that required no one's permission but my own. He showed me the correct way to use my inhaler with a spacer and gave me a device called a peak flow meter, which would allow me to monitor my own breathing daily and catch problems before they escalated into emergencies. My parents visited again 2 days later, and this time their demeanor had changed. They were angry, pressuring me to tell everyone I had exaggerated the story, insisting that our family didn't deserve this kind of scrutiny from CPS or the police. I had my phone hidden under the blanket, recording everything as my father leaned in close and threatened to make my life a living hell if I didn't stop cooperating with the investigation and come home like nothing had happened. While I was confined to my hospital bed, I scrolled through social media and saw that Chloe had posted dozens of perfectly curated photos from her Sweet 16 party, as if nothing had happened. The captions were all about her best night ever and the amazing meeting with the modeling scout. The comments were a battlefield. Some people asked if I was okay after hearing I'd been rushed away in an ambulance. Others, Chloe's loyal followers, parroted her narrative that I was just faking it to steal her spotlight. Seeing those glossy, happy pictures while I was hooked up to IV lines and oxygen monitors made me feel physically sick. Sophie spent hours at the hospital meticulously writing out her official statement, filling it with detailed medical observations about my blue lips and fingernails, the cessation of my breathing, and the exact amount of time it took for my parents to finally allow the 911 call. She made copies and gave one to CPS and another to the police detective assigned to the case. She promised she would testify in court if it came to that, because she had witnessed criminal neglect that almost cost me my life. Jessica returned to my hospital room the next morning, carrying a thick folder. She pulled a chair close and explained that CPS was enacting an emergency safety plan. This meant I could not return home with my parents while they completed their investigation. She asked if I had any safe relatives or friends I could stay with. I thought about my aunts and uncles, but they all lived far away and had always sided with my parents, believing Chloe was the perfect child. Sophie had been texting me all morning, and when I mentioned needing a place to stay, she immediately called her mother, who agreed to take me in without a moment's hesitation. It took 3 days of paperwork, background checks on Sophie's parents, and a home visit from Jessica to ensure their house was a safe environment. The social worker came to inspect Sophie's home, making sure there was a proper bedroom for me, and interviewing her parents about their work schedules and their understanding of the situation. Once everything was approved, Sophie's father drove his truck to my parents' house to help me move my things. My parents stood in the doorway, their faces masks of cold fury, as I packed clothes, books, and my school laptop. Mom kept pleading that this was all a huge misunderstanding, and I should just come home. But Jessica was there, a silent guardian, ensuring they didn't try to stop me. Dad crossed his arms, telling me I was making a terrible mistake that would tear our family apart, but I just kept carrying boxes to the truck. Chloe watched the entire scene from her bedroom window, her fingers flying across her phone screen, no doubt crafting her own version of the events for her audience. When we arrived at Sophie's, her mother had already made up the guest room with fresh sheets and cleared space in the closet for my clothes. The following week, I had my first meeting with Mrs. Davis, the school counselor. Her small office was decorated with motivational posters and had a bowl of chocolates on the desk. She pulled up my class schedule and started taking notes about which teachers needed to be informed about my medical condition and what accommodations I would need. She made sure I had explicit permission to carry my inhaler everywhere and to leave any class if I felt breathing difficulties, no questions asked. She also arranged for extended deadlines for all the schoolwork I had missed while I was in the hospital. She even offered her office as a safe place for me to eat lunch whenever the cafeteria felt too overwhelming. That night, Liam texted me, saying he had found something I needed to see. We met at a coffee shop, and he showed me screenshots of text messages from 2 years prior. They were between him and Chloe. In them, she was laughing about how I had begged her to let me see a doctor for strep throat, and how she had refused just to see how long I would suffer. It's so funny how she has to ask my permission for everything medical, she had typed, followed by a string of laughing emojis. Liam had saved them because even back then, something about it felt deeply wrong. He forwarded everything to Jessica's email right there as we sat in the coffee shop and promised to testify about both the party and these old texts. Dr. Carter scheduled another appointment and spent another hour teaching me how to properly use the peak flow meter. He had me blow into it 3 times in the morning and 3 times at night, recording the numbers on a special chart. He explained that normal readings for someone my age should be between 380 and 400, but mine were hovering around 250 due to the years of damage from untreated attacks. He pointed out the zones on the chart. Green meant I was okay. Yellow meant I needed to be cautious and use my rescue inhaler, and red meant I needed to get to a hospital immediately. For the first time in 4 years, I had a way to objectively measure what was happening inside my own lungs, instead of waiting for Chloe to decide if I was sick enough. That same day, a friend shared a screenshot from our school's group chat. People were asking about me after hearing an ambulance had been at Chloe's party. Chloe had replied, saying I was staying with friends for a bit because I was going through an attention-seeking phase, and that everyone should stop spreading rumors. A few students pushed back, saying they heard from people at the party that I had stopped breathing. But Chloe insisted it was all exaggerated and that I was fine. She claimed I had always been jealous of her, and this was just my latest scheme to ruin something important for her. A few days later, Jessica called me to her office. She sat me down in a small, sterile room and explained how the investigation would proceed. She said they were looking into potential criminal charges against my parents for child endangerment and medical neglect, but warned me it could be a long process involving months of interviews and court dates. She asked if I was prepared for that, and if I understood that if charges were filed, my parents could face jail time. 2 weeks after I left the hospital, I returned to school. Walking through those doors felt like stepping onto a stage. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, hear the whispers. During my 3rd period class, my chest began to tighten. I heard that familiar, faint wheezing sound. Without a second's hesitation, I pulled out my inhaler and used it, right there in the middle of class, without asking anyone for permission. The attack subsided within minutes. My teacher didn't say a word, because Mrs. Davis had already briefed all of them on my medical plan. Later that week, a large envelope from the hospital arrived for Sophie's parents. Inside was a copy of my complete discharge summary, including the official notes from the nurses. Reading through the medical jargon was surreal but validating. Phrases like acute respiratory distress, suspected medical neglect, and Child Protective Services contacted due to parental failure to seek care. The next page detailed my 4 minutes of cardiac arrest and noted that Sophie's quick administration of CPR likely saved my life. At the bottom, the attending physician had written that my parents demonstrated a disturbing lack of appropriate response to a life-threatening emergency and recommended immediate CPS intervention. Then, on Friday afternoon, I got an email from the principal. My parents had requested a meeting to discuss what they called misunderstandings and rumors about our family that were negatively affecting Chloe at school. The meeting was set for the following Thursday. The thought of being in the same room with them, listening to them twist the truth, made my stomach clench. Mrs. Davis offered to be there with me and said I didn't have to go, but I knew I had to face them. 2 days before the meeting, Mrs. Davis called me into her office, and we spent 3 hours preparing. She had a packet of papers on student rights and marked sections with sticky notes, emphasizing that my parents could not force me to go with them or sign anything. She strategized where I should sit in the conference room to be closest to the door and gave me phrases to use if they started yelling. She underlined sections on medical autonomy for minors in cases of abuse and taught me how to calm myself by counting my breaths. She promised to sit right next to me, taking notes, and if I needed a break, I could tap her arm twice, and they would leave immediately. The next morning, Sophie handed me a manila envelope. Inside was her formal, typed statement. I read through 4 pages of clinical descriptions of my condition that day, complete with her observed pulse rate and respiratory patterns. She used terms like cyanotic lips and significant oxygen deprivation in my nail beds, language from her pre-med classes that made the event sound even more medically severe. She had signed and dated it, adding a note that copies had already been given to Jessica and the police detective. After chemistry class on Wednesday, as I was at my locker, Chloe cornered me, slamming the metal door shut. She grabbed my wrist and twisted it, her nails digging into my skin. "You need to tell everyone you're fine," she hissed. "This whole thing is being blown out of proportion." I tried to pull free, but she squeezed harder, leaving angry red marks. "You are ruining my life over nothing." When I finally yanked my arm away and started to leave, she spun me around so violently that my books scattered across the floor. Students stopped and stared as she screamed that I was a jealous liar, and this was just my latest attempt to steal her spotlight. I gathered my books in silence and went straight to the nurse's office, where she photographed the nail marks on my arm and filed an incident report. Thursday came. I sat in the conference room between Mrs. Davis and the principal as my parents walked in with their lawyer. Mom started crying immediately, saying I had always been a difficult child, prone to dramatic exaggerations. Dad insisted Chloe knew me better than anyone. They argued the permission rule was just their way of stopping me from seeking unnecessary medical attention for minor things. I waited until they were finished. Then, calmly, I explained how the rule started when I was 12. I listed specific times Chloe had denied me care. The principal's face changed when I told him about waiting 6 hours with a broken finger because Chloe was at a sleepover and couldn't be bothered. When I mentioned suffering with strep throat for 2 weeks because Chloe claimed I was faking to get out of her choir concert, the principal started scribbling notes furiously. Their lawyer tried to interrupt, but the principal held up a hand and told me to continue. So I did. I told him about every single incident I could remember. A few days later, Jessica called. She had interviewed Chloe, who spent 2 hours insisting I had been faking illnesses my entire life, even presenting a timeline of my supposed attention-seeking acts. But when Jessica pressed for details, the dates didn't line up with any school absences. Then Jessica presented Chloe with my medical records from when I was 12. They showed I had been hospitalized with severe pneumonia that had gone untreated for so long it had caused permanent lung damage. When confronted with the chest x-rays showing the scar tissue, Chloe reportedly went silent, then claimed she couldn't remember that incident. The next Monday, my pediatric records, 15 years of them, were faxed to Dr. Carter. He spent his lunch break reviewing them, his expression growing more concerned with each page. He found 7 distinct episodes where I had presented with serious illnesses that had progressed far beyond normal stages due to delayed treatment. Each episode perfectly coincided with a major event on Chloe's calendar: a dance recital, a competition, a major social event. He laid out the pattern on his desk, using sticky notes to mark each incident and the corresponding delay in care. By Wednesday, Dr. Carter had composed a 5-page medical opinion detailing how this pattern of denied care could have killed me multiple times over the years. He included copies of lung scans showing the scarring from untreated infections and blood tests that revealed signs of my body fighting off major infections without proper antibiotics. His conclusion was blunt. No child could fake the physical evidence present in my medical history, and the delays in treatment constituted gross medical neglect. That night, my phone blew up with texts from my parents. If I didn't tell CPS I was exaggerating, they would cut off my college fund and make sure I had nowhere to go when I turned 18. Dad's messages grew more aggressive, calling me ungrateful and accusing me of destroying the family over teenage drama. I screenshotted everything and immediately forwarded it all to Jessica and to Laura Reed, a civil attorney Mrs. Davis had connected me with. Laura went to the courthouse the next morning and filed for an emergency protective order, arguing it was necessary to stop the intimidation. With the threatening texts as evidence, she said a judge would likely grant it quickly. That weekend, I sat at Sophie's kitchen table with a legal pad and began my own timeline. In the first column, I wrote the date of an illness. In the second, the illness itself. In the third, what Chloe was doing that day. In the fourth, whether or not I received care. After 3 hours, I had 4 pages filled. The pattern was undeniable. Every school play, every dance competition, every important social function for Chloe lined up with a time I was denied medical help. I remembered having strep throat during her 8th grade graduation and being forced to sit through the ceremony with a 103-degree fever because she said I was faking. I remembered breaking my wrist and not being allowed to go to the ER until the next day because Chloe was having a sleepover and didn't want the attention shifted to me. I had documented 27 separate incidents over 4 years. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Liam. His voice was shaky but clear as he recounted what he saw at the party. My blue lips, my purple fingernails, the way I was gasping for air, and most importantly, his father physically grabbing Sophie's arm to stop her from calling 911. He said he had been filming for Chloe's birthday video and had caught some of it on his phone, including my father saying they needed Chloe's permission first. 3 days later, I was in a courtroom with Laura for the protective order hearing. My parents walked in with a slick, expensive-looking lawyer who immediately argued that this was a private family matter. The judge, an older woman with glasses on a chain, looked at him over her rims. "Are you seriously suggesting," she asked, "that it is an acceptable parenting choice for one minor child to hold medical authority over another?" The lawyer tried to spin it, but the judge cut him off and asked my parents directly if they forced one daughter to get permission from the other to use an inhaler during an asthma attack. My mother started to explain how Chloe just knew me best, but the judge's face hardened with every word. After 40 minutes, she granted the protective order. I was given full authority over my own medical decisions, and my parents could only see me with supervision from CPS. The judge said she had never in her career heard of parents delegating medical decisions to a sibling and found it deeply disturbing. That afternoon, I saw Chloe's Instagram post. It was a long rant about how I had destroyed her future. The modeling scout had officially passed on her after hearing about the party incident, and she blamed me for sabotaging her dream. But the comments were turning against her. Students who were there were calling her out for letting me nearly die. I even noticed a few of her own friends had unfollowed her. Later that week, Jessica stopped by Sophie's house with the preliminary CPS report. I read through 15 pages of interviews with witnesses, doctors, and school staff. The report used phrases like extreme medical negligence and failure to protect. It concluded that neither of my parents seemed to understand the severity of their actions. The recommendation was for CPS to remain involved, with mandatory parenting classes and supervised visits. 2 days later, I met with the assistant district attorney, Mark Jennings. He was younger than I expected and looked tired. He explained that while my parents' actions were criminal, proving they intended to kill me would be almost impossible. He said child endangerment charges were much more likely to stick, because the evidence they put me in danger by denying care was overwhelming. He asked me to write a victim impact statement. That weekend, my parents filed a formal complaint with CPS, claiming Sophie's family was alienating me from them. The accusation made my hands shake with rage. Sophie's mom just held me and said, "We have the truth on our side, honey." That's all that matters. 5 days later, Laura called. The complaint had been dismissed. The judge who reviewed it noted that I was placed with Sophie's family for my own safety based on medical evidence, not manipulation. The following week, I went back to Dr. Carter's office with my peak flow log. My numbers had improved dramatically, from a baseline of 250 to nearly 380. I hadn't had a single major attack since I started taking my maintenance inhaler every day, on my own schedule. Dr. Carter smiled as he looked at the charts. "This," he said, "is what happens when asthma is properly managed instead of ignored." 3 days later, I was called to the main office for Chloe's Code of Conduct hearing. The principal and 2 administrators sat at a long table. They had a folder of reports and witness statements from students who saw Chloe grab me in the hall. I explained what happened and showed them the pictures of the bruises on my forearm. They took notes, then revealed that 3 different teachers had reported seeing Chloe confronting me despite being warned to stay away. That night, around 11 p.m., I got a voicemail from Chloe's number. I almost deleted it, but something made me press play. Her voice was slurring, and she was crying. She admitted she knew I was sick at the party, but she couldn't let it ruin her big moment with the scout. She rambled about how she got scared when she saw me turn blue, and how she needed it to be fake so she wouldn't feel guilty for wanting her party to be perfect. "I never meant for you to die," she sobbed, "but I couldn't admit I was wrong in front of everyone." My hands were shaking. She had just confessed that she knew I was dying and chose to lie. I immediately saved the message in 3 different places and emailed copies to Laura, Jessica, and Mark Jennings. This changed everything. The next morning, Dr. Carter called to say he'd finished his formal report for the criminal case. He read me parts over the phone, using phrases like respiratory failure and cardiac arrest, and explaining how withholding treatment during an acute attack was a form of medical negligence that could easily lead to death. He said he would testify as an expert witness. 2 days after that, Mark Jennings called. He said that with all the evidence, especially Chloe's voicemail, they were moving forward with misdemeanor child endangerment charges against my parents. He explained felony charges were still a long shot, but a misdemeanor conviction would still mean up to a year in jail and a permanent criminal record. He asked if I was okay with that level of accountability. I was. The next week, I had a CPS case conference. They recommended family therapy. I told them I didn't feel safe in therapy with people who didn't even admit they did anything wrong. The supervisors agreed to hold off on therapy until after the criminal case. My safety, they said, came first. A few days before the hearing, I met with Jessica and Laura. I told them I wanted to testify, not as a victim, but as a survivor telling the truth. We practiced my statement over and over until I could say it without my voice breaking. The next week in gym class, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. But instead of panicking, I took out my inhaler and my peak flow meter. My numbers were dropping, but not into the danger zone. I calmly told the teacher I needed to sit out. I used my inhaler, monitored my numbers, and within 15 minutes I was back to normal. The gym teacher watched and said, "You handled that perfectly." I realized then that the fear was gone. I was in control now. 3 days later, walking to my car, I saw my parents' SUV. They got out and started walking toward me, violating the protective order. I immediately pulled out my phone and called the compliance line Laura had given me. As they got closer, Mom crying and Dad insisting they just wanted to talk, 2 campus security guards intercepted them. They informed my parents about the protective order on file with the school and told them to leave or face arrest. The next morning, Chloe found me at my locker and started screaming that I had ruined her life. I didn't say a word. I just held up my phone and recorded the entire tirade. Afterward, I went straight to the principal's office. It was the 3rd incident report against her that week. An emergency disciplinary hearing was called. The result was a suspension from all extracurricular activities and an official no-contact order on school grounds. 1 violation, and she'd be expelled. Finally, one place where I was truly safe from her. 2 weeks later, we were in court for the arraignment. My parents pleaded not guilty. The trial was set for 6 weeks later. A month after that, I stood at the podium in the courtroom and read my statement. My hands shook, but my voice grew stronger with every word. I described the rule, the party, the 4 minutes I was dead. The courtroom was silent except for my voice and my mother's soft sobs. After 3 days of testimony from Sophie, Liam, and Dr. Carter, my parents' lawyer asked for a meeting. They reached a plea deal. My parents pleaded guilty to a lesser felony, receiving 18 months of mandatory parenting classes and probation instead of jail time. It wasn't prison, but it was a guilty plea on their permanent record. The judge approved it, but then he added his own condition. He extended my protective order indefinitely and added a clause specifically stating, in clear legal language, that Chloe had 0 authority over my medical decisions. My health, the order stated, was my sole right and responsibility. 2 weeks after the trial, CPS officially closed the active phase of their investigation. I was safe and thriving with Sophie's family. That night, Sophie's parents sat me down. The emergency placement was over, but they wanted me to stay for the rest of the school year or even until graduation. Sophie's mom took my hand. "You've become like a second daughter to us," she said. I said yes immediately. They had shown me more real family love in 3 months than my own had in 16 years. 3 months later, I was in Dr. Carter's office again. My lung function was up from 60% to nearly 90%. The damage, he said, was mostly reversed. That weekend, Sophie's mom took me shopping for my own medical supplies. We bought a Purple Peak flow meter, extra inhalers, a nebulizer, and a lockbox to keep it all in. We got a medical alert bracelet engraved with my conditions. For the first time, I knew I would always have what I needed to breathe without ever having to ask for permission again. My asthma was controlled. My living situation was stable and loving. I was even working on college applications, writing essays about overcoming medical neglect and finding my own voice. It turns out, when you can finally breathe freely, both literally and metaphorically, anything is possible.